When people ask me, what's so special about First Baptist on Fifth? I answer quickly. It's not our building, though lovely, or our worship, though meaningful, not our gatherings, though life-giving, or even our missions and ministries in the world, though impactful. The very best part of First on Fifth? Our people, hands down. In our confession of identity, we said this of our community. Here, you'll see retirees and families with rambunctious little ones, teenagers discovering their identities, middle-agers juggling all the demands of this season, young people navigating adulthood for the first time, and seniors rich in wisdom and encouragement. You can read our fiery op-eds in the paper, pass us moving about on the city streets, see us building ramps for the underserved, catch us finding beauty in our gardens and on hiking trails, and experience us taking delight in the world. At the core of our community, we are folks who love each other well. And at the core of our life together, we share in meaningful conversation about what it means to live and love in this world. That's what you'll hear and who you'll hear from in our new podcast series called Life Together. Each episode will be hosted by one of our ministers and will feature a conversation with one or two or even several of our beloved church members. They'll answer a handful of questions about their story, about objects or artifacts that represent their journey, about questions or doubts they wrestle with, and why they are a member, and finally, what gives them hope. As you listen to their wisdom and laughter, their audacious hope and abundant love, I trust you'll be as inspired and moved as I am on the regular. T.S. Eliot once asked, "What life have you if you have not life together?" Join us this season for Life Together. Hello and welcome to the First Baptist on Fifth Life Together podcast. We're so glad that you've joined us today. And we are so delighted to have our friend Kelly King here in conversation with us today. Let me offer a few words of biographical introduction. Kelly worked for 50 years at BB&T, which we now call Truist. He retired as CEO in 2021 and as executive chairman of the board in 2022. And it has been a delight to watch you in retirement share his gifts in a variety of ways, working with his son, who is a banker, volunteering in a number of faith-based initiatives in our local community and around the country, spending meaningful time with his family, and doing so here. Kelly is a voice that is shaping national conversations around leadership, around innovation and faith. And I told Kelly just before we started that it was, that I looked up when you and Eva Ann joined the church, which was in 96, almost 30 years ago. You have served your church well. You've been a deacon. You've chaired a number of committees and teams. You're a faithful member of that Tuesday morning devotional classics group, which is far earlier than I want to get up in the mornings, that you're meeting early and talking about faith. So Kelly, in your work, in your life, in your role here in the church, we're grateful for your leadership. So thank you for being with us today. Mm-hmm. So we've got a handful of questions for you that we've been asking everyone we're having conversations with. And so the first is simply tell us your story, particularly people or places or seasons in your life that has most powerfully shaped, for good or ill, your understanding of God and yourself.
Well, thanks for letting me share with you in the audience. Because my story is one that's kind of like a roller coaster, and there's some aspects to it that I think may be helpful to people.
Yeah.
When I was growing up on a farm, we were very, very poor. My dad was an alcoholic in those early years, although I tell people I'm proud to say he stopped drinking later and became a strong Christian. But when the kids, we were growing up, it was a tough life. And so as I came through that experience, not unlike a lot of kids of alcoholics, I was determined to be successful. And some people don't understand that drive. It's a drive to not go back to where you were.
Right.
when you were poor and cold and hungry and scared. You don't want to go back there. So it's this drive to be successful. So I was fortunate to go to East Carolina University, got my undergraduate, got a graduate degree, did real well, got good grades because I worked like crazy, and got a job with BB&T. And I was doing great. I was moving up the ladder, and I was pursuing success, So what I had read and been told is, if you're successful, you'll be happy, and success is about all the money and the stuff. And that's what I was chasing. And about 30 years old, I hit a wall.
Wow.
And the world just kind of came crashing down. I suppose you would call it a significant emotional event. And all of a sudden, I just could not figure out life at all.
Wow.
I was depressed. But being analytical, as I'm not going to tell anybody what I'm going through. They'll think I'm crazy. So I said, I'll figure this out. So I spent 6 months of just deep, what I'd call introspective self-analysis. And the more I dug into it, the worse it got. I mean, I just couldn't. And I still remember one day I was working in Charlotte, and I drove home, and I just crashed, and I pulled up beside the road. I was crying like a baby.
Right.
And I just looked up and I said, God, this is Kelly. I know you may I know you know everything, but I haven't been very good. But I need help. I just need help. I cannot do this. I need help.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was almost physically a hand reaching down and grabbing me by the arm and lifting me up.
Wow.
And said, I got you.
Oh, my goodness.
And from that moment forward, I didn't feel alone.
Yeah.
It wasn't like everything was perfect, but I was at peace. I knew I was not by myself. I had the hand of God holding me.
Right.
And that carried me through that. And, then I kind of went through kind of a normal period of 20 years or so and made progress in my faith. One of my good friends recommended I go to the 5-year Bible Study Fellowship program, which studied the whole Bible. And that was really helpful. And I was tracking along. And another point I would make is that when I was approaching 55, I was probably like number 3 in the bank at that time. My predecessor, who had started the bank 1 year before me, we were really close. And I thought he was going to work forever. So I'm sitting there at 55, and I'm saying, well, I'm going to go ahead and leave and do something else. So one day I'm on my knees praying and about, what I should do. And this, again, was almost audible. And God said, look, I have been working all these years to get you where I want you to be in that bank. You get up and go back to work. And I said, yes, sir. I said, yes, sir. And I did. And I didn't look back.
Wow.
And 5 years later, I was CEO.
Wow.
So I know that God had a plan. I just didn't, early on in my faith journey, I didn't understand how important it is to trust God. I was trying to figure it out myself.
Sure.
I was trying to pursue success and happiness the way the world said. And none of that worked for me. And then, I worked several more years and retired, at 73. I'm 76 now. And it's a really good place now. I'm really enjoying doing what I should have been doing. I bet I've said 100 times over the years, maybe more, people would ask me about my priorities in life, and I would say, my priorities in life are God, family, and bank, in that order.
Yeah. I think I've heard that from you a time or two.
But I didn't practice it the way I would like to have. So now I'm really trying to practice that. And you mentioned I'm working with my son in an investment fund. I'm doing some community work, which is part of giving back.
Right.
But the biggest, I call it my 3 buckets. The biggest bucket is really listening to God. Yeah. And the amazing thing is I know he was talking all along. I just wasn't listening. As I've listened, more doors open. Like I've got a relationship now with the American Bible Society and Guideposts, Dr. Williams Appeals Organization, and different things that just keep, and I kind of, the door opens, I kind of run through it. So,
yes.
So that was kind of my journey from a poor depression journey of trying to be successful and then getting close to really figuring out what success and happiness is.
Kelly, I'm so struck by so many pieces of your story that are extraordinary, that the life that you've been able to build and live and flourish within. And there are so many pieces of your story that are very ordinary that I bet everyone listening to can relate to. We've all had those seasons where we've tried to take things into our own hands and struggled to trust God along the way, and needed to be moved from one place to another. Right. Just like you say that you were. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. I wonder, one of the questions that we've been asking that has been just fascinating to see what people hold on to. What are the items or artifacts that matter to them? So my question for you is, if you had to choose an artifact, one or two or whatever, that would kind of represent parts of your journey, what would that be and why?
Well, I knew you were going to ask that question, so I did think about that. And it's kind of interesting. It kind of tracks, as you would expect, my life journey. So this will be surprising to you, but the first thing I would mention is heat vents in the house. Heat vents
in the house. Interesting. Okay.
Because when I was growing up, we were poor. when I was 13, we were still living in a plank old farmhouse.
Wow.
With no insulation, cracks in what you could see outside. No heat, central heat, no running water. And my brother and I would have to take turns every morning in the winter to get up and build a fire into one little potbelly stove in the middle of the night. And it was if it was 25 degrees outside, it was 25 degrees in the house.
Wow.
And so I was cold. And now today I'm cold-natured. And so very often in the winter, I'll go by a vent and close enough, I'll feel the warmth. And it'll just remind me of how fortunate, how blessed I have been. And I should not take warm heat for granted. I should not take running water, having a bathroom. Those are blessings of life. And so many people today still don't have. There are people in our market, there are people right now, especially in the mountains of North Carolina,
right,
they don't have any of that.
Right.
And so it's been helpful to me to have that reminder that's all kind of always around.
That's right.
So a heat vent. Another one, I'll call this a virtual artifact, is when I was going through that period of depression and trying to figure out how to come through that, one day I heard that there was a positive thinking rally coming to town. I'd never been to anything like that. So I went, and they had speakers like Dr. Norman Vincent Peale and Earl Nightingale, and it was great. 10,000 people there.
Wow.
But what struck me was, after 3 days, at the end, one of the speakers said, there are 10,000 of you here. 95% of you are going to go out, and for a day or two or three, you'll feel good. You'll feel things great. And then you'll go right back to where you were. 5% of you will decide to listen really to what you've been told and change your life.
Wow.
When I walked out of the Coliseum, I said, I'm going to be one of the 5%.
Wow.
So, because so much of my life to that point had been negative.
Yeah.
And I have the right to change it, to take a positive view.
That's right.
So I went back, I actually went to the bank and I developed a program. We called it EPA, Enthusiastic Positive Attitude. And I did little programs around the bank. Even at that time, I was mid-level management. But the CEO brought me down to a meeting of all the higher-ups and all, and let me put on my little my talk about EPA. And so the longest time at the bank, I was the EPA guy.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was very proud of that because it was a way of just helping people reflect on they should be, positive, and because alongside all the negatives of life, there are plenty of positives.
That's right.
You just have to look for them.
That's right.
And I've tried to be committed to being an enthusiastic, positive person, an optimistic person. So that's an artifact that stays with me, and I'm proud of. And another is during that same period, I was having anxiety, attacks, and I had to, oftentimes get up and give public speeches. And here I am, this little poor farm boy, up there speaking in front of 1,000 people. I said, this is not going to work out well.
Yeah, right.
And but I did a lot of reading about it. And I read something that's very interesting is that almost all, certainly most public speakers get anxious.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they learn is that a neat little way to help deal with that is to hold something in your hand. And so if you're talking to something, it's a physical something in your hand that lets your mind go to that versus this other crazy stuff. So I started carrying a cross. I still carry it to this day.
Yeah, you fished it out of your pocket right before we started.
I keep it in my pocket all the time. And for me, as I've grown in my faith, it's almost an attachment back when God reached down and grabbed my arm.
Wow.
When I grab this, I'm grabbing his hand.
Wow.
And it doesn't. I do it all the time now. I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm not anxious that often. I've been blessed, but it's a good reminder of who's in charge. So that's three things I would mention as artifacts.
I'm really glad to know that these are things that I didn't know about you, and I'm grateful for you for sharing, especially what you said about the conference that you went to. What year was that for you, Kelly?
That was like 1980. Okay.
Because that positive attitude, positive thinking, sort of a positive framework for living, that has been a consistent thread through your life. That was one of the first things I learned about you. So I'm glad to know the origin story there.
Well, and that's why The Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Winston-Salem is one of my 5 great books.
Yeah.
Because it's been so good for me. That's why I'm volunteering now to help Guidepost organizations. Because they're out there, and a lot of the audience will know Guidepost.
Yeah.
And their challenge, by the way, right now is to figure out how to get their message across digitally and get these types of things versus magazines. But,
right. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now I'll know if I see you reaching in your pocket, I'm going to think you're going for the cross. That's right. I wonder, you've referenced several times seasons of your life that have been really difficult, that you've, struggled with just the basic necessities of life, struggled with depression or anxiety. And I'm sure even a man of strong faith as you are, you've had seasons of doubts. And so I wonder what are some of the questions or doubts that are that have been very present to you? Maybe they're less present right now, but they have been some ones that you've wrestled with throughout your life.
Well, early on, my doubt was, how do I, when I let go of this attachment to the physical, how do I really get comfortable grabbing that hand? Yeah. And there's a tendency to go back. Yeah. So I need more money. I need another promotion. I need. No. So that's been a struggle for me all along. I'm in a good place now. I'm thankful. But that's been a struggle for me. And I think it's a struggle for a lot of people. Yep. And then one of the things, Emily, that I struggle with is lots of my Christian friends, they seem to be so clear about things that are very public and very controversial that I'm not very clear about. And I'll just, people like on abortion. Some people are adamant. You should. Adamant, you should not. Homosexuality. Some of my Christian friends. You can't let them into church, and we even know, some people, you can't even have a woman minister. Right. And they're adamant about this stuff. And I said, well, where'd you get that? Because as I read the Bible, I don't get that. And so it challenges me. But I've gotten at peace with the great thing about God and the great thing about the Bible is He puts it there for us to use to allow Him to speak to us. And the way He speaks to me may be very different than the way He speaks to you. I'm fine with that. I hope He will be.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, but I just find that it worries me that people are so adamant about something that, to me, they'd be a little better off if they would focus on the part of the Bible that says, love your neighbor. Yeah. And so when I have friends and they want to get engaged, I say, well, let's just agree on this. If we could agree on John 3:16, we can discuss the other.
There you go.
But if we can't agree on John 3:16, we don't have anything to talk about. And
tell us, you have such a draw to that verse as an expression of sort of the gospel in a nutshell. Tell us what does John 3:16 mean to you?
So about 40 years ago, my wife and I were getting ready for church one morning, and we were listening to a country music station, and they played this song, which was always very hard for me to share emotionally because it really impacted both of us. Yeah. And it was a song about a lady who was just singing, a story. And this little boy in a big city was really poor on the streets, and it's cold. And he goes out one morning and he sees a police officer. And he goes up to him and asks him, can you help me? And the police officer said, yes, go right down here 3 blocks. There's a big white house. You knock on the door, and when the lady comes to the door, you say John 3:16. The little boy did. Knocked on the door. The lady comes in. She says, well, come on in, son. Are you hungry? He said, oh, yes, ma'am. I haven't had anything to eat in 4 days. She said, sat him down at a big table full of food, and the little boy says, I don't know what all this food is, but it really makes a boy feel good after you've been hungry all this time. She said, would you like to have a bath? Oh, yeah, I've never had a bath. Only time I get cleaned a little bit is I stand out in front of the fire hydrants when they flush them. She gives them a warm bath, and he says, I don't know what this John 3:16 is, but boy, it makes a boy feel warm and clean, good food. It's John. So he just says, what is John 3:16? So she takes him into the living room by the fire and says, well, would you like to know what John 3:16 is?
Yeah.
And he says, yes, ma'am. And she tells him the story of Jesus.
Wow.
And he accepts the Lord.
Wow.
And from that moment forward, my wife and I have both felt that that's a powerful message for us.
Yes.
It's the central message in the Bible, of course, but it's a message of helping people on the margin that need help. And when Christ was here on this earth, he ministered first to the physical needs, and then he ministered to the spiritual needs. So that lady was helping that little boy who desperately needed physical. If she'd have stopped him on the street and started talking about the Bible, I don't think she would have gotten very far.
That's right.
But when she fed him and got him warm and cleaned up and all this, now he's receptive. So we feel now drawn to trying to use the resources we've been blessed with to help with the physical needs in the community. So that's why you hear me talking about that.
I've never heard that story either. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
I was struck I quoted a writer yesterday in my sermon who said, the church is never more wrong than when it is certain it is right. And your comment earlier about Christians who really lock into one position or the other and are certain they're right can sometimes lead us into places where we don't need to be going. The Bible gives us so many beautiful examples of people wrestling with God, the story of Jacob at the River Jabbok, just wrestling, and he walks with a limp forever after that, and I just appreciate so much your willingness to share honestly about doubts you've had or struggles you've had, and that is part of living a faithful life. It's not opposite from living a faithful life. That's part of it. Right. Thank you. I wonder if you could talk a little bit now. Now it's been almost 30 years you've been a member here at First Baptist. Why did you become a member? What was that like? And is there any particular story about life at First Baptist on Fifth that you'd like to share?
Well, we had been members because we mostly lived in my working life in big cities. And so we've always been in Baptist churches and almost always downtown Baptist churches. So we were drawn to take a look. But our daughter at that time, we just moved here and she was 9 years old. We wanted a church that would be attractive to her. And First Baptist had just started an early service.
Yes, right.
And we thought that a casual service would help her feel welcome and more comfortable early on. And so that's why we picked it. And then David Hughes was our pastor for the longest time. And we got to be close. And so it was a comfortable place for us. And then leadership opportunities opened. And so I was actually asked to be chairman of deacons, which I was happy to do. And then a year later, they asked me to do it again. So I told my wife, I said I did not get it right. So I did it again.
Get a second chance here.
But it's been just a journey of watching the church evolve. As you know, our church is going through a huge amount of dynamic change now. And you're doing a great job, by the way, helping lead through that change. And we've done a lot of things. So I like being a part of an organization that is evolving and changing, and trying to pursue God's will, even in the midst of obstacles. And that's what First Baptist is doing.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love the story that you've shared. I've heard you share a few times about your first time chairing the deacons, someone raised their hand and said, "No, Kelly, you can't run this place like you run the bank."
Right.
You know,
Right.
And you've probably learned a lot through your time here.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if, as we wind down, if you could speak to what gives you hope right now.
Yeah, I'd like to share a little story with you about that, because when we did the merger at BB&T and SunTrust became Truist, and we became the fifth largest bank in the country and all that, but we also happened to be right in the middle of the pandemic. And it was a big merger, and it required a lot of hands-on, the way we like to try to lead, my predecessor and myself. But I was stuck in the office. I couldn't get out and go shake people's hands and welcome them. And so I did a lot of visual, Zoom meetings, and as I went through that, I did lots of them. And so I kept hearing in almost every one of those settings, to be 25 or 30 people on the call, it would be said, "I can't wait for this pandemic to be over so I can be happy again." And I started dwelling on that. I said, that's not really good, because we don't know when the pandemic's going to be over. Will it be over? And yet everybody waiting for it to get over. Is that the only way? And so I did a lot of thinking about it and praying about it. And I came up with 4 steps of how to be happy, even in the face of difficult circumstances. I'll share them with you real quick.
Yeah, please do.
Give you the Cliff Notes. So the first step is to choose to be happy. Sounds almost trite, but that's the first key, because most people don't really believe that they have the right and the ability to choose to be happy. Rather, they believe their happiness is a function of what goes on around them. So this bad thing happened. There's a pandemic. I can't be happy. I lost my job. I can't be happy. This person doesn't like. I can't be happy. People go through life letting circumstances determine whether they can be happy. It doesn't have to be that way. You can just simply choose to be happy. And then when you do that, the second step is to be clear about your purpose in life. Another one of my 5 great books is Man's Search for Meaning, written by Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, spent 3 years in Auschwitz, lost his entire family. But out of that, he grew closer to trying to help people. And so in that book, he says, if you know your why, you can endure any how. I paraphrase by saying, if you're clear about your purpose in life, you can figure out how to overcome the problems. So it's really important in life, for everybody listening, it's really important to be clear about what your purpose in life is. Another, as you would expect, the number 1 of my 5 great books is the Bible. So I draw my sense of purpose from the Bible. My personal purpose is to make a positive, godly impact on the lives of as many people as I can. That's why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And so then the third step is to have what's called a growth mindset. Another one of my 5 great books is called Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K. Read that book. It's fantastic, because most people go through life choosing to have a fixed mindset. That is to say, they don't believe they can learn, they can change, they can grow. They're a victim. They're just what they are. So bad things come along and they give up. People who have a growth mindset believe the truth, which is that they can learn, they can change, they can grow, and they can overcome obstacles. It gives them a sense of confidence by having a growth mindset that I can grow through life.
Right.
And there will be bad things for sure, but it doesn't have to ruin my life.
Right.
And then the 4th step in developing that mindset is that another one of my 5 great books, The Power of Positive Thinking. And that's by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. And that's a framework, it's a way of thinking in Christian terms to help people see how they can they can grow through life, they can do it in a positive, enthusiastic way, and it just helps you deal with problems. I mean, the 3/4 of the challenge of life is to figure out how to deal with problems. Sadly, most people don't know how to do that, so they just give up. And so the 4th step in how to be happy, even in difficult times, sounds simple, but it's the most powerful, and that is to help others. So, you've heard about people having the runner's high, joggers.
Yeah.
What actually happens is when they're running at a certain point, the brain tells the body to emit a chemical called endorphin.
Yes.
And it's actually a physical event that endorphin makes you feel better.
Yeah.
They studied now that when people help others, you have that same effect.
Oh, interesting.
It's still the same endorphins. So when I ask people to consider just helping others, to help yourself and help them,
right?
People say, well, I'd like to, but I don't have the time and I don't have the money. Here's the thing. It doesn't take much time, and it doesn't take any money. The most important thing people need today especially, is a sense of hope.
Yeah, that's right.
The sense of my life can be better. I can get through this.
That's right.
And so they need to be told and shown by others that their life matters.
Yes.
So you don't have to give them a bunch of money. You just have to show them they're important. So you know what I've figured out? The most simple thing you can do multiple times every day is just smile at people. Just smile. I'll tell you a true story. A sad and then a positive part of it. A number of years ago, there was a young man in San Francisco that left his apartment, walked several miles to the Golden Gate Bridge, climbed to the top, and jumped off to his immediate death. They found a note in his apartment that afternoon, and the note said, "I'm going to walk to the bridge. If one person smiles at me, I won't jump. One person, one smile, one life." There was another young man. His name is Kevin Hines. A few years later, he also walked to the bridge. He also climbed to the top. He jumped off, and he survived. Now, let me tell you this. When you jump off the top of the Golden Gate Bridge, it is the same as jumping off the top of a 28-story building. When you hit, the force is so great that it crushes every organ, every bone in your body. He survived because a sea lion came up and kept him afloat until the Coast Guard got there.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
I believe Kevin Hines had a purpose in life.
Wow.
And he does too. He's written about it. He talks about it. But he said, same as the other young man, he said when he was walking to the bridge, he was so depressed. He couldn't express to anybody this deep hole he was in. He just needed somebody to reach out to him. One smile would show him that somebody cares about me. And so I've given people this challenge, and I would give it to this audience.
Yeah.
You know, it's what I call seeds of hope.
Yes.
When you get up in the morning, when you're getting ready, even before you greet your own family, imagine that somebody hands you a handful of invisible seeds. These are seeds of hope. And every time you go out during the day, starting with your own family, just smile at people. Say, "Hey, how are you?" Just a nice wave, pat on the back. Do those little things. And every time in your mind, when you do one of those, take one of those little seeds and toss it down on the ground. You just planted a seed of hope. And I fully believe that if you'll do that to the best of your ability, you won't get it right every day.
Sure.
Do it the best you can. As you get close to the end of life, you'll look back on your life and you'll see the results of those seeds of hope. You'll see that little boy down the street during the pandemic that couldn't read, and you spent Saturday mornings helping him learn how to read. You'll see that family member who's going through a divorce. You spend extra time with them, helping them. You'll see all these people that you help. You'll see the results of those seeds of life, of hope, and you will know, that your life mattered. And that's my hope and prayer for everyone listening today.
I know that you who are listening can hear why you are such an effective, meaningful, thoughtful public speaker and motivator, someone who speaks from the truth and honesty of your life into people where they are. Thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing with us today. I am curious, though. You've mentioned 4 of your 5 great books. What would be you said Man's Search for Meaning, the Bible, Mindset, and Power Positive Thinking. What would be your 5th one? Do you have one?
Oh, that was so. It's the Bible.
Yes.
A Search for Meaning.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did leave out Chasing Daylight. I'm sorry. I left that.
Chasing Daylight.
Chasing Daylight.
Okay.
By Eugene O'Kelly.
Okay.
So Eugene O'Kelly started out with KPMG, one of the big accounting firms in the world.
Yeah.
Started out at 17 years old in the mailroom. By the time he was 43 years old, he was the CEO.
Wow.
Started having headaches. Diagnosis, incurable terminal brain cancer. You'll be dead in 90 days. And he was. But he chose to write this book to try to help people see that life can be precious, even though it might be limited in time.
Wow.
He wrote the whole book. He couldn't write the last chapter. His wife had to because he got so weak.
Right.
But in that book, he talked about what he called consciousness of the moment.
Okay. Yeah.
That if you go through your day, just watch TV and don't do anything, it's like, the day just fly by.
Yep.
But if you go through your day and you really focus on what's important in life, what your priorities really are, A day is a long time, an hour is a long time. I mean, if I just stop right now for 10 seconds and didn't say anything but just stared at you, you'd think that 10 seconds was like 2 hours. And so it is true. And so that made a real big impact on me that, you know, whether I'm on this earth another year or 20, who knows?
Sure.
But I've got a lot of time.
That's right.
If I use it wisely.
And you do. You do just that. Thank you for rounding out our reading list.
Read them all. They're great.
That's right. Kelly, thank you so much for being with us. And for those of you listening, I hope this conversation has encouraged you, blessed you as much as it has me. So, thanks for tuning in. You can find the previous episodes of our Life Together podcast on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, and YouTube. And you can also go to our website, firstonfifth.org, read more about the church, and hear the rest of the podcast. Friends, thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.